What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. It's been a while. I truly appreciate everybody who's been checking out the show and sticking with the show. It's awesome when I go a couple weeks without putting something out and I see people are continuously going into archives and downloading, or they might be new listeners. But either way, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm Ricky Vranis. It's the Ripple Effect Podcast. And today we got Mary Ellen Moore, executive producer and VP for public affairs for Free Mind Films, which might sound familiar because I've had Chris Emery's on from Free Mind Films. And I talk a lot about State of Mind, the Psychology of Control, which is one of my favorite documentaries. And if you want to see a historical documentary about propaganda, mind control, and the psychology of control, really, how those in power from all the way from the Greek times and Roman times, and how those in power understand how to control a population, then definitely check it out. I highly recommend it. And she's on to talk about ShadowRing. And even though we don't talk about it right in the beginning of the show, as you guys know, I basically just try to have a conversation with a guest and record it. And that's all my podcast is. It's like recorded conversation. It's not necessarily an interview, even though sometimes it sounds more like an interview and other times it sounds more like a conversation. And the goal is always just to kind of record a conversation, put it out there, and hope that people like the uncensored, casual conversation we have. And usually it works out and it turns out for a really interesting and fun show. And ShadowRing is awesome. It's a new documentary that just came out, so please rent it, purchase it. And in the video episode on our YouTube channel, the YouTube channel is called RV Theory 6, or you can just search the Ripple Effect Podcast. You'll find it. I'll have links to the documentary itself. And actually, Kevin Sorbo, which I don't know how old you guys are or the average age of the show, but anybody who was alive in the 90s might know Kevin Sorbo from Hercules, a very, very popular show, one of the most popular shows in the 90s. He narrates the show, this documentary, which was awesome, and kind of reminded me of Ethos with Woody Harrelson. Any of you longtime listeners know I had Pete McGrain on, who did the documentary Ethos, which is another great documentary. I believe it's still on Netflix at the moment. Check that out. And Kevin Sorbo and Woody Harrelson kind of went out on a limb and really didn't mind the idea of talking about these controversial issues and talking about serious issues, and wasn't afraid of maybe people calling them conspiracy theorists or whatever. And it's really, they put their image and their career, I guess, to some sense, on the line with doing these documentaries. So a lot of credit goes out to them, and I think it's awesome because a lot of people who are fans of theirs will be exposed to this information in these documentaries. So I think that's awesome. So with that said, I think that's about everything. Thanks again, guys. I truly appreciate everybody who's been listening. I'm so sorry I haven't put out shows as often as I'd like. I truly feel guilty when I don't, and guilt is, for me, it's been an awesome tool, because if I eat like shit, then I feel guilty and I want to go to the gym, or I don't want to lose a day of the gym, or I'll eat better on the next meal. And guilt with my work is the same thing. If I have a mental deadline when I don't put something out, I truly feel guilty every day that goes by and I don't put it out. So I think in some cases, guilt's kind of a good tool. But thanks again, guys. I truly appreciate it. Also, if you guys want to support the show, as I always tell you, Theory 6 Music, you can find the links to that on our YouTube channel underneath the video episodes, or in the description. Wow, I'm having a brain fart today. This is what happens when you work a full-time job. In the description of our video episodes, you can find the links to all our guests' work and also my work, including the Theory 6 Music Project, which is everywhere you can find downloadable music: Amazon, Google Play, iTunes, and all that money goes to supporting the show and that music project. So it's a small little donation, which I really, really appreciate. Also, if you guys want to help the show, as I always tell you, can rate the show on iTunes or Podomatic or Stitcher, however you're listening to this, and do that. I really appreciate anybody who goes out of their way to do that. It doesn't take a lot of time, and it helps people find the show. And honestly, I'm kind of talking out of my ass. I'm not sure how it helps. I'm assuming it helps people who are finding the show, but every podcaster kind of says the same thing. It helps, and I'm not sure any of us really know how it actually helps, but if you can do that, I'd really appreciate it. So hopefully the next show doesn't take as long as this one. Like most of you guys, I work a full-time job, and I'm it's hard to find time and even harder to find energy sometimes when you do have free time to do things like this and edit and book guests and all this stuff. So, but I'll definitely do my best to keep doing it, no matter how much time goes by. I promise you more shows are on their way. So everybody who's been loyal and sticking to this show, I really, really, really appreciate it. And I guess I'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. This is quite an honor. You with the cutest baby in the world.
It definitely, we've been very lucky, me and my wife, to have such a cute baby. And I think that's one of those things that as a parent in the back of your head, you always, you hope you're going to have a cute baby. And honestly, I'm not sure if you didn't have a cute baby, you would know, because we're a little biased. So we would think our kid's the cutest and the smartest and all those things.
Well, you really do. He's just adorable, and he looks extremely healthy.
Yeah, he is. And last time we talked on the phone, it was funny because we talked about vaccinations and some other things. And it's funny when you become a parent. Like, I already thought I was pretty passionate about a lot of these issues like GMOs and vaccinations and all this stuff. But once you become a parent, it just goes to the max. And it just, I can see why so many mothers are big protesters and big activists against GMOs and just being concerned about the quality of our food and what we're putting into our children. And it's because it's not about us anymore. It's, if we do something to ourselves, it's like, we can kind of deal with it because you're not harming somebody else. But when you're responsible for somebody else's life who can't save themselves or make those decisions, you really put a lot of pressure on yourself to make sure you're making the right decision. That's why the vaccination debate is so important, because like you said when we talked on the phone, it's one of those things where it's not about who's right or who's wrong, but it's about getting all the information out there. And I don't blame any parent who vaccinated their kids based on the information they had, because a lot of times they get bad information. I had a friend of mine whose girlfriend works at a hospital, and they were over the house to see my newborn when he was born, and we're talking about vaccinations. And she worked at a hospital, so she probably has a little bit of a biased opinion. And she was like, "Oh, you should really vaccinate your kids, this and that." And we got into this debate, and I'm like, you know what? But it doesn't seem like the pediatricians know both sides. They don't. He told me that there's no what's the word I'm looking for? No proof, no scientific evidence that vaccines has ever harmed anybody and all this stuff. So I started going down all the information I knew, just going down the row of information. I'm just like, well, that you go to a special vaccination court that specifically just for those type of lawsuits. There has been tons of money given out to families who've sued vaccine companies. So obviously that means something went wrong. We talked about the thimerosal, the mercury preservative that was in the flu vaccine, which I'm sure every doctor was telling their patients at the time, oh, it's safe and take it. And then eventually they removed it. And all these things. And then just more recently, like I told you on the phone, I had John Rappaport on, and he was one of the people who really was pushing the CDC whistleblower story, which I'm still very surprised it's not a bigger story than it seems to be. It seemed like it got a little bit of it picked up a little bit online and social media, but eventually it kind of started dying down. And it seems like such a huge story that I'm not sure why it's dying down. I don't know if it's the big pharma trying to quiet it, or I know that Obama gave, or at least I heard or read somewhere that Obama gave the doctor, which I believe his name was Dr. William. I can't remember his name. I probably should look this up before I brought it up. But the doctor, the CDC whistleblower, who was a part of this MMR vaccine study,
yes,
the author of the study, I believe, he, I believe Obama gave him immunity so he doesn't have to talk to anybody or whatever. So there's a lot of just interesting things in that story, and the fact that people are just still talking about, vaccines are completely healthy, and look what happened in Florida with all the measles outbreaks, and even though they weren't telling you that a lot of those kids were vaccinated that were having the outbreaks and getting measles. So obviously it wasn't the lack of vaccines that caused it. So there's just a lot to it, and I think when you become a parent, you become way more conscious of these things and way more concerned, and I think it's only given me more motivation to do things like this show and promote and do my part in trying to get documentaries like your recent one, ShadowRing. And for people who are listening who don't know Mary Ellen Moore, she works for Free Mind Films, and they just put out a documentary, really great documentary that I actually got the privilege to watch ahead of time, called ShadowRing, which was written by James Perloff, who's been on the show, and some of the listeners who've been listening for a while might be familiar with Chris Emery, who's also been on the show. We talked about their two previous films, State of Mind, Psychology of Control, and A Noble Lie. So definitely check it out. We'll talk more about where you can get the film and all that stuff. But sorry about my little rant. I guess once you become a parent, I think you become a little even more passionate than you are about some of these issues. And I know that it's definitely motivated me even more to just do my best to try, like I always say, try to leave the world a little better than I received it for my son and everybody else's kids who can easily be brainwashed by propaganda to go along with certain ideologies and stuff like that. So is that something or do you have any kids, and did you see any difference in the way you looked at certain issues and stuff? Did you become more passionate after that?
Well, interestingly enough, Ricky, I forgot to have children. So, but what's amusing about that is the vaccine issue is something that's very, very important to me. I sometimes look at these mothers and mothers to be, and I'm how can you not do this research, not do this homework? But I had a vaccine injury. I lived in Southeast Asia for almost a year, and the United States Air Force, I was an Air Force dependent. I wasn't in the Air Force, but I went over there on my first husband had a tour over there, and I actually went with him. It was kind of at the end of the whole Vietnam thing, which was before your time. And at that time, they weren't giving the military as many vaccines as they are now. But I got vaccines that I didn't even need to get before I went over there, and I got a couple boosters while I was there, and they had to air-evac me. I had an immediate reaction, which is different than a lot of the long-term reactions that are difficult, I think, for parents or even people in the military to tie back to the vaccines. But no, I'm very passionate about this subject, and also it does tie in. We don't get into the medical monopoly with our film, but we do get into the Council on Foreign Relations and the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and all these guys, and they are the ones that formed this original medical monopoly and formed the American Medical Association in the late 1800s, and they made it possible for all the homeopathic doctors to be called quacks and shut down. So basically what we have today, because of these money elite, is a medical monopoly of allopathic medicine, which is, if you're in a car accident or you have a heart attack or you get your arm chopped off or something, yes, you want to have allopathic medicine. But in my perfect world, allopathic medicine would work with homeopathic medicine. And for the vaccine thing, you have to start with the premise, whether you believe in God or not, I happen to, but you have to start with the premise that God forgot to give human beings an immune system. So when you look at the number of vaccines, when I was a baby, there was no vaccines till I was 4 or 5 years old, and then it was polio and all that kind of stuff. But today, these kids are getting 50 vaccines and combinations thereof before they're 3.5 years old. I mean, at some point, you have to look at this, no matter how much you're brainwashed, and go, there is something wrong with that, and who benefits? Well, we know who benefits. The doctors don't have time to study all this, and you have the big pharmaceutical companies are totally profiting from being sick, from sickness, and from these children getting over-vaccinated, and I'm going to add our pets and our elderly. So, my holistic doctor told me 5,000 milligrams a day of D3 is your flu shot. don't ever get a flu shot. I've never had one, fortunately, but I tell people that, and I tell them not to get flu shots, and they look at me like I have a third eye. But anyway, that's a different subject. That's not technically in the movie, but it is connected.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about natural remedies. I've had Mike Adams on from Natural News, Nancy Gabberty, who is just really smart and really knows her stuff about homeopathic medicines. And I'm not a religious person, but I've had friends of mine. I had a friend who's very religious, and he had a vitamin store, all supplements and stuff like that. And the people that he helped, and he was one of those people that, he believed that, hey, God already put all the medicines we need on this earth. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not religious, but it kind of makes sense, And before synthetic medicines, people were using all types of herbs and stuff like that for sicknesses. And people do it's we talk a lot about history on this show, but one thing we don't talk a whole bunch about is the history of homeopathic medicines and how the AMA really did make homeopathic medicines look like you're a voodoo doctor if you're using them, and it's pseudoscience and all this stuff. And people forget that our current modern medicine really is kind of new and really isn't that old. And it's putting the money in the hands of, well, one, it's for profit, which is a huge issue anytime I think medicine's for profit. And two, you have to look at it, the fact that only synthetic things can be considered medicines, because there's so many restrictions on vitamins and minerals, on what they can state on their labels. They can't say that it heals or cures or helps any specific sicknesses. And really, I think that the reason why so much money went to synthetic medicines was because also the fact that you can patent something. You can't patent vitamin D. You can't patent vitamin C. You can't patent milk thistle or whatever herb you want to take, omega-3s, whatever it is. You can't patent that stuff. So there's not any real money in that. And, I've had Dr. Gregory A. Smith, who did the movie American Addict, and Dr. Brzezinski, who's been fighting the FDA since at least the early 90s, who's been curing cancer on. And definitely go in the archives and check those out. Those are Dr. Brzezinski. I'm a huge fan of Dr. Brzezinski and then just, what he's trying to do. But you see these doctors who have these alternative views on medicine, and they get looked at like they're insane. You look at people now who are using THC to cure cancer, people who are using I think ecstasy and LSD to help PTSD. And Amber Lyons has a site called Reset Me, and it's all about just marijuana and psychedelics and DMT and all these things and how they can help cure so many issues. But all that stuff is looked at as pseudoscience, and it's a shame. And we have to look at who's profiting. You look at all the money that Pfizer's making, Bayer, and we talked about how, when we talked on the phone last week or earlier this week, whenever it was. Now I'm getting my days all mixed up. But when we talked on the phone, just the idea of how much money they make, and then how they get something FDA approved, and then soon after it's taken off the market. And we've all seen it. I mean, all my listeners, I'm sure you've seen commercials where you see a pharmaceutical drug that now is taken off the market, and there's some law office telling you to call them because you can get some money if somebody was killed or got really sick taking something. Well, before that was taken off the market, it was FDA approved to be safe. And so it makes you question, well, one, it makes you question how thorough they're testing these things, which they're not really doing a good job testing it, because the people testing them are the pharmaceutical companies. So obviously that's tainted alone. So, I mean, I just think that this all kind of ties together, because all these issues is greed and money that trumps morals and everything else. And I think that's a huge issue with our society. I think that's a huge issue with just this capitalistic world we live in, where it's all about money. It's all about maximum profit. And you rape the earth of this resource till it's not profitable anymore, and you move on to the next resource. And nobody's looking long-term how it's going to have effect on the environment, how it's going to have effect on people. And I think some of it has to do with the fact that there's just people looking at everything like it's a statistic. Everything's just mega data, and it's like, how can we make quarterly gains? How can we make, companies are public, so it's all about quarterly gains. It's all about maximum growth, and that's just not realistic. You can't have maximum growth, and so I just think it's money and greed is the root of all evil, and it's a cliche, but it's true. And when you look at, the motivations for all these things, that's what it always comes down to.
Well, you're absolutely right, and I think we have, unfortunately, the people in our country have become very, very, and I say sick in the sense of everybody's toxic. And when you have the combination of a society that's basically sick and also a society that's toxic, it's hard to imagine that there's not some kind of agenda out there. I mean, getting back to John D. Rockefeller, when he was fresh from his triumph of organizing his big oil monopoly in the late 1800s, he was a creature of the House of Rothschild and his Wall Street emissary, Jacob Schiff. They realized that they had to have a medical monopoly because this is a thing that was going to bring them greater profits, even than the big oil trust. And if you notice, a lot of the pharmaceutical industry is based on petroleum products. And so are all the cosmetics and creams and stuff we slather on our bodies. And anytime you see the word mineral oil, even things like Vaseline, it's all mineral oil, which is all petroleum. So it all comes from that. I know this sounds rather unimportant, but it actually is very big. This brought such incredible profits along with the big oil profits. So, gosh, I think it was around the late 1800s that Rockefeller appointed a guy named Fred Gates as his agent. And he kind of headed up all of the Rockefeller so-called philanthropic things in his societies that he did. But he was in charge of kind of increasing the whole wealth and power of this and also fixing it so that the AMA overshadowed all the homeopathic doctors. It was a whole thing. They hired this guy named Abraham Flexner to go around to all the medical schools, and they kind of figured this whole thing out, how they were going to create a medical monopoly. And this is very important because this affects us to this day. And, people have got to wake up. And I'm not saying that there isn't a place for pharmaceutical drugs and for conventional medicine for certain things. I really want to go on record as saying that because, but people don't know how to take care of themselves. And it's all about looking to doctors and all doctors do today is basically have their prescription pad. Of course, it's all done by computer, but so yeah, it's very scary, and I want people to be critical thinkers about their bodies, and especially parents. And I just tell new mothers or mothers to be, please, if you do nothing else, if you decide to vaccinate, that's fine, but please do your homework. Read about how infant vaccines are they're criminal. They're absolutely criminal to give an infant a vaccine, 1 hour out of the womb. And so anyway, maybe we should jump to the next subject, but I can see we're both very passionate about this.
Yeah, it's one of the, it's hard to see so many just innocent children and not be passionate about it. And the other thing too is that I think I told you on our phone call earlier this week about how I've had friends of mine who vaccinated their kids, and I talked to them about it, and they felt guilty after I talked to them about it. And I'm like, don't feel guilty, because I'm not, I'm taking in all the information and I'm making a decision based on that information. Unfortunately, you didn't have all the information to make a decision. You made the best decision you could based on the information you have, and you can't, no parent should feel guilty about that. It's unfortunate that pediatricians won't. I mean, my pediatrician, he we butt heads quite a bit, and it was just, he'd make me feel guilty. My child only got he only received his first hepatitis B shot right when he was born, and a lot of it was because we were so tired and sleepy, and we didn't sleep for like 24 hours that we didn't even know what was going on. And all of a sudden, a nurse walks in and said, "Hey, just letting you know, we gave your son his first hepatitis B shot." And I'm just like, "What? What's going on?" And then it didn't even hit me till like the next day. I'm like, "Wait, did a nurse tell me yesterday that And then he was, according to the schedule, I think he should get another one within a month, and then another one within 3 months or 6 months, whatever it is, and all this stuff just adds up and adds up and adds up. And the other thing is, you can't really there's no real tests to prove that vaccines work. The only way you could actually prove that they work if they did something which would be inhumane, and that's give these children vaccines, then give them the virus, or make them sick and see if it helps recover from it. They wouldn't, so obviously they can't really do that. So all they're doing is checking if they're making the antivirus, and and then that's, they say that it's working because you're creating some type of antivirus. But I'm pretty sure when you have AIDS, they they test you for antivirus for HIV, and that doesn't mean you're going to heal from it, and you're going to protect yourself from it completely. Even though there are some doctors and scientists that believe the pharmaceutical drugs that you take actually is what kills you quicker. It's not the actual virus itself, because it just weakens your immune system. And you know what? I don't know. I don't know enough about the subject to say for sure, but it kind of makes sense, because you look at I just met somebody recently who said that their father beat cancer twice, and he was so anti-chemo and radiation because he's had other friends and relatives that did it, and it screwed him up so bad that he's like, you know what, I'm just going to change my diet and exercise. And it sounded so simple and ridiculous, but this guy didn't just beat it once, which some doctors could say was a fluke, but he beat it twice. And so it's pretty amazing when you think of, the fact that maybe if we just took better care of our bodies and gave it the herbs and minerals and vitamins it needed so it could naturally fight some of these viruses, maybe it would that alone could go a long way, and we wouldn't need so many medicines. And I mean, because you look at it, people are getting constantly sick, and even though, some people will say, well, look at polio, polio's not you don't see anybody with polio because of the vaccine, but you see an increase in other things. So who knows? It's hard to but again, you have to get all the information, kind of make your own decision. But yeah, I think these are one of those topics that it's hard for anybody who has opinion on this topic not to be passionate about it. And I think even the pro-vaccine people are passionate about it. I think their heart's in the right place. I think it's because they truly believe that kids are being harmed by not getting vaccinated. Even though my child's not vaccinated, and everybody talks about how aware he is, and you've seen the pictures, his eyes wide open, and he just turned 5 months, and since a month and a half, 2 months, everybody would tell, this is my first child, so I'm not sure what they're should be acting like or how they should react to certain things, but they're saying, how he's paying attention to things, and then he holds his head up, and all. I mean, he's just progressing very fast. And so, I mean, I don't know, maybe it has nothing to do with the vaccines or not being vaccinated, but I know that he's healthy as hell and he hasn't got any vaccines. So, knock on wood, so far so good. And I really hope I made the right decision based on the information I had. And I think that's a hard decision to make,
Well, you're doing the right thing, in my opinion. But you went ahead and you didn't know and got the hepatitis B. But hepatitis B is passed through sexual contact and dirty needles. Now, so somebody has never given me a good explanation why a brand new baby, an hour or two out of the womb, needs to have a jab for something like that. See, that tells me, and I've had friends that literally go in and say, I don't want the hepatitis B, and they try to, I said, you can't let that baby out of your sight for 2 seconds. Someone needs to have their eye on that child, because you'll tell them no, and they give the child the shot anyway. That's how brainwashed these nurses are and everything. They think, well, we're going to give them the shot. They just do. That's something they do with the vitamin K and the hepatitis B right after birth. But anyway, I want people to just be aware. That's even if you decide later on that a couple shots, or you're going to go live in Africa or something like that, and but breastfeeding and eating healthy and building up a baby's immune system. And then, I'm not recommending vaccines, but if you decide it's something you have to do and will do, you can space them out, give them one at a time, and give the ones that are only necessary for things that would actually kill you.
Yeah, that's another thing I tell people. It's, even if you want to go along with it, just don't give them all at once. I mean, you're talking about a newborn baby who hasn't even been exposed to bacteria or anything. His immune system's still developing, and you're immediately shooting him up with viruses. So it's just, it doesn't make any sense. It's like that you figure there's very sensitive, and then multiple viruses at times. I mean, the MMR vaccine is one of those that it's multiple shots in one, which in nature and naturally, I'm not sure you're ever exposed to all those viruses at once. So I just don't know how you can look at that and say that it's not questionable. And I know that people like Jennifer McCarthy and Jim Carrey get just bashed because anybody who questions vaccines is called a loony and blah blah blah. But I think as a parent, if your child did improve or its cognitive function went downhill after a certain vaccine. I mean, you kind of keep track and you know how your child's acting. So if she says her child got a vaccine, then started acting differently, then who are we to say she's wrong? And if she says she got him on a nutritional plan and really worked on healthy foods and that helped, then who are we to say that she's lying? I mean, I just think that people who jump to conclusions and say she's insane, even though there's a book called Knockout by Suzanne Summers, who
read it, love it.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Brzezinski was in that book, and
so was Dr. Gonzalez, who just passed away, unfortunately.
Oh, really?
Yes, you heard Dr. Nick Gonzalez just passed away. These doctors are dropping like flies, these holistic and alternative doctors. Have you kind of noticed that he's about the sixth one?
Yeah, I just heard on, I don't know if it was a podcast or where, somebody was talking about how it just seemed like kind of coincidental that a bunch of alternative, I guess what the mainstream media would call alternative medicines. Yes. These type of doctors are all kind of just passing away, and it just, it does seem kind of interesting. I mean, there's so much money involved in medicine. If cancer was cured today, the money that would be lost by radiation and hospitals and medical companies. I mean, there's just, like Chris Rock said, there's no money in a cure, and it doesn't make any sense to give anybody a cure. And it's not doctors' faults, because I truly believe that they're taught something. They're, it's just put in their head that this is the way it works. Here's a symptom, and here is the pharmaceutical drug for you. And they just don't know any better most of the time. I truly believe, and they don't know anything about natural remedies. My parents are Portuguese. I was born in Portugal, and I have to go translate for my parents when they go to the doctors. And a lot of times I'll ask them about a natural alternative remedy when they're trying to give my dad something for like Lipitor for the 100th time, and my dad drinks wine, and I asked the doctor once, I'm like, well, shouldn't we be a little concerned about his liver, because I know Lipitor is really toxic to the liver, and he does drink wine every day with his dinner, and it has a espresso with a little shot with it and stuff, and he's like, oh, don't worry, the heart attack will kill him before his liver does. And I'm just like, oh, that's reassuring. I'm like, I feel so much better now. It's like, and then I talked to him about I think, what is it, red yeast rice or something like that, which is a natural remedy for cholesterol. And
natural Lipitor is what it is. It kind of does the same thing. In fact, I think you have to be a little bit careful with that, because really? It is a lot like that. But there's all kinds of wonderful natural cholesterol managing supplements out there. And first of all, you have to get the idea out of your head that high cholesterol in and of itself is bad for you. It isn't.
Yeah. That's kind of propaganda within itself. I've heard people say that it was one of the first things they could test in blood, so they kind of put what they thought was an unhealthy amount, put that rating kind of low, so they could prescribe more cholesterol medication, which kind of makes sense, because honestly, I had a doctor tell me that my father had the highest cholesterol out of all his patients, and I translated this to my father. My father looked at me, and he's like, I work 50 hours a week every day or every week. I come home. He's a farmer. He was born and raised on a farm. So he comes home, does yard work, feeds he still has some animals in his backyard. And he's like, does it seem like I'm gonna die anytime soon? And I'm like, no, you're up earlier than I am. And even if you go to bed later than me, I'm like, you seem pretty fine. And it was just one of those things where I don't know anybody who's died of cholesterol. I'm sure there might be some, but I mean, my father has the highest cholesterol than any other one of his patients, and he seems healthy as a horse, and he's had it forever and never one issue. So it definitely makes you second guess how serious high cholesterol really is.
Yeah, it's a never-ending thing, and they create diseases out of symptoms just so they can promote the newest and latest drug. And as you were saying earlier, I think they run all these actuarial tables and figure out how much money they can make, even if the drug proves to be bad, so it's taken off the market in, say, 5 years. But they've made, let's say, $15 billion, and so they have to pay out $7 billion in damages to people. This is how evil these people are.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like how the banks were making money when they were laundering money to the Mexican drug cartels. They made so much money off it that, even if they did get caught and got fined like they did, it wasn't nearly anything close to the profit they made. So, I mean, this it's the common theme, the greed and power. And we talked about, when we talked on the phone earlier this week, we talked about how your new documentary, ShadowRing, if people haven't seen it, please go out and check it out, support them. I'm a huge fan of both their other documentaries. One is A Noble Lie, about the Oklahoma City bombing, which growing up was always really interesting to me because I was born on April 19th. So it was weird because a lot of weird things happen around that time. You look at like Columbine, you look at so many historical events happen, April 18, 19, 20. I think Hitler's birthday is April 19th or 20th or something like that, or the day he died. I don't know. It had something to do with Hitler's also within that week. And there's so many weird historical events. But, so that's a really good documentary, Noble Lie. I highly recommend people checking that out. And then State of Mind, The Psychology of Control, which I've recommended to a lot of people. And that's one that I get tons of awesome feedback from. People really seem to like that one. And I think that so many of these documentaries show you what happened and all this stuff. But State of Mind really gets into the root of how the history of propaganda and how they've been doing it forever, and Machiavelli and all these people who've really understood how to and Huxley and Edward Bernays, all these people who really understood how to manipulate people, how to control people, and how to keep people servant to those in power. And it really is almost like a historical documentary on mind control and propaganda. And I know those are two terms that people use a lot in YouTube videos and alternative media, but this really does. They don't just say, "Oh, MK Ultra," and hey, it's mind control, and not really give you any real good facts and information. You did awesome research on that film, and it was just so interesting. I mean, I had to watch it numerous of times. I have it on DVD. I watch it every once in a while because I have a hard time remembering everything, all the good information that was in there. And you had tons of just really interesting people on there. Richard Grove from Tragedy and Hope, and who's the other guy? Anthony. He was a part of the Able Danger.
Anthony Schaefer.
Yeah, Anthony Schaefer, who which was awesome to have him in there because his story is amazing. How he was a part of basically looking into these terrorists who should have never been let on a plane, and he was basically a whistleblower. And so it's an awesome documentary. Now ShadowRing, let's get back to half an hour later.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. No, that's what I love about these podcasts, is that I think people really do enjoy just a conversation, hear people be passionate about topics, and wherever the conversation goes, it goes. And I think people kind of like that spontaneous part of it. But to talk about ShadowRing, how did you get involved in Free Mind Films, and I guess we could start there. How did you get involved with Free Mind Films?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be able to take early retirement from my airline career, and previous to that I'd been an actress, but I've been kind of I don't want to call myself an activist when I was a child, but I had incredible parents who very much fed me a lot of information as quite a young child, and my parents were very what would be termed conservative. They were joined the John Birch Society back in the early 60s. So while I was getting a very liberal education in my public school, they were feeding me with the other side, and I really believe that helped me to become a critical thinker. And I've been always interested in, and I hate to use the word conspiracy because it's kind of like it's the right word to use, but it has a bad connotation today. And there are agendas out there. Sometimes I use the word agenda. There are agendas out there, whether it's in the medical monopoly, or if it's with just the military and corporations and the way our government is run. I mean, everybody can see a lot of the obvious ones, but it's the ones that are subtle. And I really believe that this film, ShadowRing, is a really good film to use to give to people or to watch as a wake-up tool, because it's very basic and it shows you patterns of things. It shows you that regardless of which party is in power, of our two fraud parties, my friend Pat Buchanan always used to say, two wings of the same bird of prey, and I added on, and we're the prey. And so people are so looking for heroes that they think 4 to 8 years of one party and the other guy is going to be the messiah for them. So that is a really good example of the mind control. But what they don't understand is that there are powers behind the doors that are pulling the strings of the puppets, presidents, senators, congressmen, whatever. So ShadowRing attempts to show that there is a hidden oligarchy or a hidden aristocracy, if you will, of a global elite that are pulling the strings and run the show, and they own the show. They own both horses in the race. And this is the banker elite. Now, I'm not talking about your Joe Blow bank down the street. I'm talking about the big international bankers, the with names like Rothschild and Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan and Chase and all the big names and names that a lot of people wouldn't even be familiar with that are behind the scenes. So the Council on Foreign Relations is something we get into how that came to fruition back in like 1921. But we take quite a few of the wars, starting with the USS Maine. We go through World War I and World War II, and we kind of gloss over the Korean War. We just didn't have time to put everything in this film, and then we kind of end it with the Vietnam War. We allude to 9/11, but it's been done so many times, and I think everybody knows that in these circles that there's something fishy. And we don't want to hit people over the head with that. What we're trying to do is to show people, give people kind of an exciting history lesson, and we keep bringing it back to the present with all of our wonderful interviewees, Gerald Celente, Jack Blood, G.Edward Griffin, Joyce Riley, Adam Kokesh, Rosa Corey, who wrote the book Behind the Green Mask, and she's a liberal Democrat who's very awake, and she's excellent. Her book is excellent, and she's in the film. And of course, James Perloff's in the film too, and he wrote the two books that we took the material from and then he wrote the script to make the film. So that's just kind of the overview of it. And those of you who are interested in ordering it, you can just go to ShadowRingMovie.com or FreeMindFilms.com. But if you go to ShadowRingMovie.com, the button for the trailer comes right up and then gives you the opportunity to either you can order the DVD. I'm kind of a DVD person, so I prefer having that. Or you can download it to own in your computer or download it to rent for just a short period of time, and that's a very inexpensive way to do it. But I like to get the DVD and share it. We also have bulk packaging if people want to do a screening and order, then we price it accordingly, so you can reach us regarding that. But there's a lot of information in this, and it doesn't come from a right or left. It's not Democrat, it's not Republican, so you can use this to share with everybody. And I want this to kind of show people that, does it really matter if it's going to, I'm pretty sure that the candidates are going to be the Jebster and the Hildebeest. I don't know about you. Are you kind of leaning that way too, Ricky, or are you?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. There's a lot of theater going on right now, and a lot of us don't know whether Trump's the real deal or not, and he might just be a ringer or he might not be, but either way, if he's real, he ain't going to get anywhere near the presidency or becoming the candidate. Says, I think they already have these things pre-planned. I think these candidates are pre-selected so that we all have the illusion of choice.
Yeah, I mean, to name some other people that were in the film, Ben Swann, Jim Mars. I mean, you had plenty of really awesome, recognizable people in the film, and We can't forget Hercules, who narrated the film.
Well, I was just going to say we had, fortunate enough, an old acquaintance of mine, Kevin Sorbo. He's a fellow Minnesotan like I am, and he very kindly agreed to be the narrator for the film. And Kevin's pretty awake, but he kept opening the we were out in Hollywood recording the sound, and he kept opening the door to get some air, and he'd look out and he goes, "Is this true? Is this true?" And we'd go, "Yes, it's highly documented, and yes, it's all true," because he's kind of awake as a conservative, but yet there's a lot of things that conservatives haven't heard or don't know the background to.
Yeah, I love seeing people who will put their reputation on the line to do something like this. I had Pete McGrain on, who did the documentary Ethos with narrated by Woody Harrelson. And that was another, just I was blown away the fact that Woody would do a film like that, a documentary like that, and I think it's awesome when they put because it's going to expose it to many more people. I mean, Ethos, that kind of what caught my eye. I'm like, oh, it seems like an interesting documentary, and then when I saw Woody in it, I'm like, wait, what? And so I'm like, I have to see this. So and it was way easier for me to recommend it to people, because I'd be like, oh, check out Ethos, and I'm like, oh, by the way, it's narrated by Woody Harrelson. So all of a sudden it gives it a little bit more credibility, and people are like, oh, I love Woody, I'll check it out. So I think hopefully the same thing happens with this one, and hopefully Kevin will also bring just some more fans in who wouldn't necessarily go out of their way to find this, but might just be interested to see it because he narrated it. Might be a fan of his, because obviously Hercules in the 90s was absolutely huge. I was a fan of it in the 90s, so I remember being a kid growing up, and I loved it. So I was really blown away to see that he would narrate this film, and especially when a lot of this stuff that really shouldn't be controversial, because a lot of the stuff that you talked about in the film, especially initially in the film, when it really just historical fact. It just, like you said, you talked about the U.S. Maine, you talked about Vietnam, you talked about all these just historical events which show, I guess for lack of a better term, fuckery, that showed like there's something that was going on that wasn't what we're being sold. And I mean, look at Vietnam. I mean, Vietnam's a perfect example. Pearl Harbor now, I think, is pretty well understood that it could have been prevented. Dropping the bombs on Japan, I think most historians now will understand that didn't have to happen. That
very
was
unnecessary.
Yeah,
very unnecessary.
Yeah, I mean, there's people today who are still being born with dysfunctions because we wanted to send a message to the Soviets. That's all it was about. It was about spending all that money on research and development, and then wanting to see what they built, and sending a message to Soviets, because they knew that'd be the next great battle of empires would be those two. So it was it's really interesting. So I mean, it's not, and I grew up when I really started becoming more aware of these things. I was like you. I like calling them conspiracies because that's what they were. But now it's such a way of just, I guess, calling somebody a loony, indirectly calling them not credible or a tinfoil hat wearing lunatic. It's just like, once somebody calls you, oh, what are you, a conspiracy theorist? They're not listening. They're not going to believe anything you say, and they're saying it because they're just going to disregard what you're saying. And but it's amazing, because you look at history, like you guys show in your film, it's full of conspiracies. I mean, all these events were conspiracies. 9/11 is the most recent one, and I love the fact that you guys really got into the CFR, Council for Foreign Relations, because I think people just don't realize how many people in powerful positions are in the Council for Foreign Relations. I mean, you look it up. I remember there's a video I saw on YouTube once with Hillary talking about how she loves being in Washington near the Council for Foreign Relations so she can get some advice and this and that. It's like, wait, who are these people, and why should they have some influence on our, why should this think tank have some influence on our foreign policy and be giving advice? And so it's amazing that James Perloff, who, if I probably mentioned already, but I'll mention it again, who was on the show before, and the fact that he did Shadows of Power, this was prior internet, and did a book on the CFR, when most people at that time probably didn't know who the CFR, who they were, or what they did, or what influence they had. And I think that's pretty pretty amazing when you look back. I think it was written in like 1988 or something like that.
Yes.
And,
yes, and then The Truth is a Lonely Warrior is kind of the updated version of it with other things added on in later chapters. But James Perloff is absolutely brilliant. And I've read both of the books actually. Shadows of Power was incredible, because this is all the stuff my parents talked about, a lot of it when I was a kid, but I hadn't, I was kind of too young to connect all the dots. And, I was over in Thailand at the end of the Vietnam War, and I can tell you that, we get into the movie a little bit about how the actual Tonkin Resolution was written 2 months before the incident, which never happened. It was a total creation. So you talk about false flags, and we have the great Admiral Stockdale actual footage of him talking about how he ran a patrol on his, I guess it was his A4 or whatever, for hours looking for, there was nothing there. He talks about how there was nothing there. So this was all a way to get us escalated into a no-win, undeclared war, losing 58,000 American lives, not to mention all the Vietnamese. And Ricky, I have to tell you, I'm very pro-military. I am for us, any nation that's a sovereign nation, having a very strong national defense. And but I know that our founding fathers did not intend for our young men and women of the military to be the world's police force. I mean, what do we have? Soldiers in 170 different countries protecting borders, and we don't even protect our own borders? I mean, really?
Yeah, I mean, we've occupied the world, and, where we're surrounding Russia. And, you look at the gas price, everything's just it's like Brzezinski said, it's a grand chessboard, it's a giant chessboard, and everything's just strategy. The Trials of Henry Kissinger it's a book by Christopher Hitchens, which was turned into a movie after. It really shows a lot of, it does a great job showing foreign policy and how what is sold to the public and what behind the scenes the real reasoning for it and the strategy behind it were just unknown to the public, and it's all just a charade. And I think that it's hard for people to watch a movie like ShadowRing or in the past like Zeitgeist or Loose Change or any of these movies that can really change people's perspectives on the world. I think at first it's your first reaction is to think that it's all bullshit, because I think that it's like telling somebody that you live in the Matrix. That's what I always tell people. I'm like, I think it's hard to consume and it's hard to realize, because one, it's scary. The idea that possibly everything might be a lie can be scary. And two, I just think that we've been sold so much, and we've been, marketing and nationalism and all these things sell us to these wars and all these things that I think when you tell somebody that the way they see the world might be wrong, I think their first reaction is to just resist. And I think it is hard to get through to people especially when you're giving them, if all this information is new to them. But I think the way you guys do it, when you show these historical events and you work your way up to the present, I think it's easier to consume that way, because it's like, if you just open up with 9/11, it's easy to dismiss it and just be like, oh, that's bullshit. I can't believe you guys think that 9/11 was this or was that, but when you show these historical events and you see like you said, you start connecting the dots and you start seeing how, okay, well, if this happened then, why can't it happen now? And you look at it, just look at the things that are pretty well established in American society. The fact that most people agree there's something sketchy about the JFK assassination, to say the least. You look at, the fact that then his brother got shot also. And then you look at Vietnam, which we all agree was just a complete mess. Whoever was making these decisions, or whoever was the puppet master or had influence on these decisions, what makes you think that today would be any different? What makes people think that there aren't people behind the scenes also pulling strings and also having enormous influence on our decisions when it comes to foreign policy or what's going on in the world? I mean, to me, it just seems like common sense. But I think when it happens a long time ago, when it's a historical event, it's easier to consume. But and then when people look at today, it just, I don't know. What do you think it is? Why do you think it's harder for people to kind of, I mean, you have a conversation with somebody about the JFK assassination. It's very easy to get somebody to say that, yeah, there's something sketchy about that. But when you talk about 9/11, or you talk about, whatever foreign policy is going on right now, that the fact that we funded ISIS by giving weapons to the Syrian rebels,
Right.
which was ISIS. So we're giving them weapons in Syria and fighting them in Iraq. I mean, you talk to people about that, and they'll resist a lot faster than they will talking about JFK or Gulf of Tonkin or things that happened a long time ago. Do you think it's just emotional attachment to things that we're still emotionally involved in these current events, or do you think that it's just propaganda doing its job? I mean, what do you think it is?
I do think that is part of it. What I've noticed, and I tend to, you've probably experienced this when you talk to people. Sometimes they shut down and they kind of get the glazed donut look on their face.
Yeah.
Where you can see them shut down. And what's interesting to me is, and what I've kind of decided or come to my own conclusion over the years, is that people, they're in a comfort zone and they don't want their world rocked. They don't want their world rocked, their worldview rocked, because if they have to be knocked out of their comfort zone, that means they might have to pay attention or do something. And I think people are very much just trying to survive from month to month. They want to be relaxed. They don't want this disruption. And it is psychological. I really do believe it's psychological, and they can't quite handle it, so they just shut down. They just can't go there. I mean, you really can't look at Building 7 fall and tell them a plane didn't hit this building. And they watch it fall, and then you show them the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas next to it doing the same thing, and it's kind of sometimes more than some people can take. And I always kind of feel like we have to be we're kind of here to protect the innocents. It's people like us that are going to be the ones to protect these people that can't handle it. And I want more people to step forward. I want more people to wake up. We don't have outrage in this country enough anymore. It comes in small pockets, and it's very, very short-lived. I mean, you look over in places like Greece and like third world countries, or even some European countries, and you get French farmers out, hundreds of them, thousands of people protesting. Like, where are Americans? Nothing gets us riled up anymore. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I have. It's weird because you look at what they did in the 60s with the anti-war protests,
yes,
and they didn't have the internet. Like, it's amazing what they accomplished without the internet. You figured, like, today we'd be able to accomplish something that would be unbelievably bigger than that. And I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a great job of getting us all against each other. I know that in your film, one thing I loved about it was that you had people like Adam Kokesh, who was, anarcho-libertarian, and yet you have people who are just conservatives, people who are liberals, people who don't agree with any ideology in your film, and I think that's awesome, because the one thing you see when you go to a libertarian gathering or meeting or a liberal or progressive gathering, we all want the same thing. And I think one thing we realized is, I had Mariana Van Zeller on my show, who did Breaking Borders for the Travel Channel, and it was this great show where she would go to places of conflict, and she would get Mexicans and Americans together and eat together. She would get Jewish people and Palestinians together to eat and talk and just bring them together, try to have food and alcohol to be the middle ground where they come together and at least have a meal together, and then try to spark conversation. And the one thing you realize when she's meeting with both sides, that most people want the same thing. They want a safe environment to grow up in and have their kids grow up in. They want their friends and family to succeed in life and have good lives and be safe and have food and all this stuff. I mean, we all kind of want the same thing, and all these other things like skin color and ideologies and these silly things, these borders that personally I think can be a little silly, because I think that it's a great tool to turn people against each other. It's like, oh, you're from that side of the border, so I'm picking a team. I'm on the U.S. side and you're on that side, and we have to dislike you because our countries dislike each other. And I just think that all in all, we all kind of want the same thing. And if we can kind of look past those just things that separate us, I think human nature is, if you see somebody get hit by a car, your first reaction is your heart drops and you want to help them. And I think that, most decent people, they don't care what political party they're affiliated with. They don't care what skin color they are. They don't care what what religion or ideology you agree with. It's just your first reaction is to help them. And I think that once you help that person, you can say, oh, thanks for helping me, let me take you out to dinner. Then at dinner you can get in a huge fight and hate the person because they're a libertarian and you're a progressive or something. So it's like, you look at it, most of us are very similar, and then a lot of these isms end up separating us. And I think that, we talked about it on the phone, how I think the answer probably is somewhere in between. It's probably some middle ground. It's not anarcho-libertarian ideology that if you let the free market just get rid of the state, the state's the root of all evil, and you get rid of that and everything will regulate itself. And I also don't think that more money to the government and more government's going to help either. Obviously that hasn't helped. I mean, we spend the most money on military and defense, and most of it just goes to paving roads that are other, roads in other countries that aren't ours, while we have shitty bridges and shitty roads and shitty infrastructure. And so I think that it is some happy medium. And I think that it's awesome when you get a film like yours, where you get all these different types of people together and you realize, like, oh, we're not that different. And we all come together, and we all kind of can talk about the same root of all these issues that we all want to fix, and that's money in politics, that's corruption, that's propaganda, and we need to do something about it. And I think so. I think it's a great thing. And what do you think about these ideologies and stuff like that? Do you kind of see the same thing when you meet these people? Because obviously in this film you interviewed a lot of different people with different backgrounds and different ideologies. Did you kind of get the same idea or the same feeling that most of these people, they all want the same thing? It's regardless of even though they differ in opinion in some other subjects, for the most part, we have more similarities than we have differences?
Yes, I do. In fact, I do think nationalism is a good thing if it's done correctly. And I think that you can have borders and have a certain amount of free market as long as it's an equal playing field. I'm not a free marketer in the sense that I think our workers should have to compete with people in third world countries, slave labor. So no, I've got some differences there, and I have a lot of libertarian viewpoints, but I'm not really a quote unquote total libertarian. However, I was over in England on vacation and also had a business meeting over there at the first part of June. And I got invited to a party with a gentleman. You may have heard of him, Gilad Altsman. He's a Jewish expat from Israel, and he's trying to kind of educate people on, the whole Palestinian issue. And it was really interesting. I got invited to this party. It was at a pub up north of London, and it was, I'm a Christian, my cousin's a Christian, so there was some atheists, and then you had some Jews, and then there was several Palestinians there. One of the guys did all the food, a Palestinian, with incredible hummus and everything. And he and I were actually chatting, and he said exactly the same thing you said. We were saying, it's so interesting because when we all get together like this, and we have areas where we all agree and probably areas where we disagree as well, but everybody wants the same thing. Everyone wants to have a family and enjoy their friends and live. And yet we let these global elite manipulate us into wars and into, I call it the Pax Americana, like the Pax Romana, back in the day. But, most people they're not interested in this. And if we don't have an enemy, we create one. As you said earlier about ISIS, there's always has to be a boogeyman because the military-industrial complex has got to be fed. It's a hungry giant that's got to be fed. And I would love to see world peace. I don't necessarily think world peace is possible, but I do believe that you can have a peaceful coexistence if we're not in there stirring up the hornet's nest. I mean, that's a whole other subject, the whole Middle East and everything. But, this whole thing with the Middle East started back in the early 1900s. All you have to do is watch the full director's cut of Lawrence of Arabia, and you see how we betrayed the Arabs after they helped us and England fight against Germany, and and then the Muslim Brotherhood was created, and out of that, what we did to Mossadegh in the early 50s in Iran, we helped create that monster with what's his name? Is it Kermit Roosevelt or one of the? We went in there and toppled that democratically elected regime because we wanted to run the oil and we wanted to help England run the oil. So we've created a lot of this, and I think we do it on purpose, and it's so unnecessary. I mean, if a country becomes evil and they want to start attacking other countries or attack your country, you have a right to defend your country and your people. We do, just like you have a right to defend your home. But when you're out there creating the monster, creating 9/11, so the American people would get riled up to go in and, let's see, 15 of the 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia, if it even happened that way. And so we go and we attack Iraq. I mean, where's the logic? My blonde brain doesn't compute this stuff, and I guess I'm a simple-minded person, but I look at this and go, the American people fall for this every time. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, which we allowed and baited them into doing, and then we declare war on Germany. It's kind of the whole thing becomes beyond ridiculous.
Well, I think a lot of it is, and this goes back to the film State of Mind, The Psychology of Control, and that's understanding how to manipulate people's emotions and feelings and wants, and I think a lot of that, if you look at the common theme with a lot of these things, is capitalizing on emotional people, thinking emotionally and not logically. You look at after September 11th, I forgot what the statistic was, but like some ridiculous amount of people thought that Iraq had something and Saddam had something to do with September 11th after September 11th. And that was because people were outraged. People were upset. People had American flags everywhere. They wanted to do something. They felt unsafe. They were scared. And when, it's like that saying, if you repeat something enough times, it becomes true. Well, if you keep repeating Iraq, Saddam, and September 11th, then eventually people started thinking that they're linked, and that's exactly what happened. And people fell for it. And now you look back, and Iraq was our Vietnam. It was our mess up. It was our fuck up. I'm Hollenberg, KBR. Everybody made money. There's a great documentary called Iraq for Sale, and it really documents really well all the people that made tons of money off this war, and just all the things that were subbed out for no reason. You had jobs that are usually military jobs were subbed out to private contractors, and then the people who should have been getting experience doing these things were also getting paid to sit around and do nothing, instead of getting the experience and doing the job that they usually do. And it was ridiculous. And to talk about, the fall of the Ottoman Empire in World War I. Growing up, I didn't realize how important it was, and the more I looked into it, and to see how, it became this ripple effect. I didn't mean to use my podcast.
No, that's a perfect thing to say.
Yeah,
perfect.
It became this ripple effect of really, you look at how it's still affecting. They made borders that shouldn't. Modern day Iraq wasn't there. So many of these modern day countries weren't there. I think Jordan was there. A couple countries might have existed beforehand, but. And then how they promised everybody everything. Another great film I would recommend to people, and I've probably recommended numerous of times, is called Promises and Betrayals. And I think you can find it on YouTube. And it's a great documentary, and it's about exactly that, promises and betrayals, how they promise a bunch of different people things so they can help topple down the Ottoman Empire, and then afterwards they betrayed everybody. And it documents the Sykes-Picot agreement, which Mark Sykes and the French guy Picot, who basically had this agreement on how they're going to cut up the Middle East, and what parts of the Middle East are going to have influence on after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and all this stuff. And it's all about destabilizing the Middle East. It just has nothing to do with actually fixing any of the issues. They just constantly want a boogeyman. They constantly want, like you said, they constantly want a boogeyman so they can continue spending money. I mean, Eisenhower, people should every kid should watch that speech and really put in perspective the the idea that the final words that he wanted people to remember when he left office was to beware of the military industrial complex. And I think the fact that he was in the inside and he knew what was going on, even though, you know, some historians will say he was a part of building the military industrial complex, and you know, he was a little bit of a fault for that, but at least he tried to leave the White House leaving that message saying that maybe this got out of hand, and to beware of it. So yeah, I think all those things are really important. And you know, you look at War as a Racket by General Smedley Butler, and you know, the story that goes with the business plot of all these really wealthy people trying to convince him to take down the government, which I think FDR was president at that time. It sounds ridiculous, but look it up. I mean, it's you know, he documents this. He's a very respected a guy and military guy, and wrote a book called War as a Racket. And I mean, so
I love him.
Yeah, and so it's amazing, and it's amazing how little of this history is taught to kids. I mean, I hated history in school. Well, I hated school in general. A lot of it was because it was just memorizing things and they didn't really tell you things that you could relate to your life and was important. But I mean, so many more kids would pay attention in school if you actually told some of these historical stories that they could link to current events and what's going on today, and they could connect the dots, and they could be like, oh shit, this is important because it makes sense because this is why this is happening today, you know. And so it just I think it's just people have to do research, and that's why it's awesome that in 2015 we have documentaries like this, because I think people are super busy and it's hard to get any. I mean, I have tons of books that I just can't get through. I just don't have the time, or when I do have the time, I'm too tired to actually pick it up and try to read. And it's much easier to just sit back and put on a documentary. And I think that's the way to get through to young people today. I think a lot of us get our information through documentaries. And I've had close friends kind of bust my balls about that, about like, oh, what do you get? Because I'm always recommending documentaries. They're like, oh, well, is that where you get all your information? I'm like, most of it. I'm like, honestly, I get a lot of it. I mean, there's a lot of great documentaries out there, and of course you have to do your own fact checking, and everybody has an agenda and all that stuff. But I mean, you look at it, a lot of these things, just like your documentary, ShadowRing, a lot of these things are just historical events and historical things that happen, that it isn't something, you know, that is a conspiracy theory, or you're connecting dots that aren't there. You're just stating things that happen and putting them in order where people could mentally connect the dots themselves, and the picture becomes clear to them. And
yes, that's what we're hoping to do with this film, is get people to connect the dots. And we kind of, the two previous films, they all kind of segue into each other, but this was a big undertaking because of the tremendous amount. We've got some great footage and research that was done. We were able to get our hands on some incredible archives and footage for this film that will really, I mean, it kind of, you know what, there's a lot of information, and we're working on a theatrical cut of the film, but right now it's about 2 hours and 15 minutes. And I tell people sometimes, hey, if you get information overload, just divide the film into watch an hour and an hour. And it's much easier to, because, you know, a lot of us your brain starts to get exhausted after a while when it's fun and it's really interesting. I mean, people have watched the whole movie. We got a standing ovation at a screening we did in Oklahoma City, and it moves really well. But sometimes, hey, you know, if you start a film after 8 o'clock at night, sometimes you're not going to stay awake for a 2 hour, even a feature film. So, you know, if that's the way you like to do it, then do it that way.
Yeah, I'll admit that the first time I started watching it kind of late, and I did the same thing. I think I fell asleep hour in, because I mean, like most people listen to this show, you know, everybody has adult responsibilities and jobs, so it's really hard to, you know, to find time to do this stuff. But it makes life a lot easier when you get it in a documentary and you can watch it whenever you want. Like you said, you can watch a half an hour or hour of it, and then the next night watch the rest of it. I know there's a great documentary called 9/11 New Pearl Harbor, and it's like 5 hours long. And I did the same thing. I watched it within a week, and like every night I'd watch like an hour of it, and it was amazing documentary. And same thing. So it is hard sometimes to consume all that information, especially if a lot of this information is new to you. But I just think it's so important. And I think that what you guys are doing is awesome. I mean, those 3 films are so important, and they're beautifully well done, and you have interesting people talking, and people from all different backgrounds and opinions, and I think that's and you talk about a lot of important things. You talk about obviously false flag events. You talk about the CFR. You also talk about the power of debt, which a lot of people like James Corbett, who's been on my show, and Chris Emery's and James Perloff has been on his show. He talks about debt, and he did a whole movie about how you can enslave. It's called Century of Enslavement, all about money and debt and how you can control countries and people with banking. And I think sometimes when people talk about J.P. Morgan, all this stuff, they don't realize the power that debt creates. And you look at vulture loans and all these things, putting countries into debt, and then so it's just there's so much power in debt, and that's why it seems like the euro, I think, is now becoming clear that it was an awful idea, and just having these central banks are an awful idea. Obviously, they haven't done much good. You look at the 2008 collapse that we had, and it's just, I just think it's so important, all these issues, and I think your film does a great job of just, there's really not many really important topics you guys didn't hit on the film, and like you said, there is a whole lot of information. It's hard for me to really, off the top of my head, to remember all the specifics, but it's just so well researched, and I think that's just something I think we all love about James Perloff, is that everything he talks about, everything that's in his book, everything that he talks about in interviews or was written for this film, everything has just so much research behind it, and you can tell he really took his time to just research these facts and just give enough evidence where people don't look back saying, oh, he's connecting dots that aren't there, or that seems unbelievable. I think after watching, you're like, holy crap, that seems believable, because he gave me all the evidence to believe it. And so I think it's awesome. Was there any interview or any information that really stood out to you, like any interview with any of the guests you had on your film that really stood out, or any new information that you might have maybe you didn't know so much about, and then after the film you're like, oh crap, but that was a really good piece of information I didn't know too much about until now?
There was a couple things, and I'm always amazed at how many people have never heard of the Council on Foreign Relations. But I think one of my, I love the whole film, of course, but there was one scene, if you remember, with Ben Swann talking about how he got a few minutes to interview the candidates back in 2012.
Oh yeah, Mitt Romney and
Paul Ryan, and how he was sitting on a stool and they were facing him, and when he was talking to one, the other was looking over his shoulder, and then he talked to the other one, and then Romney would look over his shoulder to somebody in back of Ben Swann, and he got up and looked, and there was a man in a business suit sitting on the sofa or on a chair, and he asked one of the other news guys, hey, who is that guy sitting over there? And he said, oh, that's so-and-so with the Council on Foreign Relations. He says they were getting like signals from this guy. And I'm like, okay, how much more obvious? Of course, the guy told him, like, oh, this is a good thing. That's the CFR guy, Well, wait a second. Shouldn't Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney be, giving us their viewpoint on things, not what the Council on Foreign Relations? And I'll say this in closing, the Council on Foreign Relations has over 4,000 members now. It started out with, a few hundred, and now there's up over 4,000. And you could kind of present it as kind of a benign foreign policy organization, but I guarantee you that within that 4,000 people, there are inner circles of elite within the elite, because you're invited to join that, and that's your ticket. That's your ticket. But there's the inner circles of the Council on Foreign Relations that take their orders, and in conjunction with what the Royal Institute of International Affairs over in London does, over in England. So these guys all kind of work together, and again, this is something that is covered in the books really completely, and also in the movie we kind of get, and then how the media is controlled. These guys are all part of the media, so that the media is, we have, 6 corporations control 99% of all the media in the United States, something like that.
Yeah. And you look at Wolf Blitzer, who worked for ALEC. You look at Anderson Cooper, who has the sketchy past of working with the CIA or being in the CIA, like all these really weird things, and you're like, wait, these people. And you look at Amber Lyon's story, how she worked for CNN, and you look at who, now I forget, Donahue, who was anti the Iraq War and was the highest rated show on MSNBC and was taken off the air. And you look at Cenk from the Young Turks and how he was outspoken, he got taken off TV. And so it's the whole media is just, that's why I love the fact that there's podcasts, there's documentaries, we have this freedom to, and that's why it's so important to make sure we keep this freedom. When the CISPA thing was going on and the SOPA thing, I mean, I'm glad that, at least that battle for the time being is seems like we won it. And, we just have to keep making sure they don't take away our freedoms for some false sense of security that they're convincing us we're getting from, getting more TSA and more NSA, information from our computers and all this stuff. So I just think, it's like that old quote, when anytime you sacrifice freedom for security, you gain neither or lose both. I probably messed up that quote, but you get my point. But it's, I just think it's so important. I think that this boogeyman, you're more likely to die from like a peanut allergy than you are from a terrorist. But yet we're spending all this money on fighting terrorism, and yet things like the Boston bombing still happen, even though those both brothers were investigated by the FBI. So how well is our research and how well is our NSA and intelligence if two people that obviously the FBI had their eye out on for at least a little bit of time, still got away with something like this? So it's one of those things where if I'm not going to be safe regardless, I at least want my freedoms, and I think that's an important thing for people to remember. But thank you so much, Mary. I really, really appreciate your time. I appreciate everything you guys do. I've had Chris Emery's on. I've had James Perloff on. And I'm glad I've had you on now. And I'll keep supporting Free Mind Films. I'm a huge fan of those films. I'm the same way. I have them on DVD. I have Noble Eye, State of Mind, and hopefully soon I'll also have a ShadowRing on DVD. Just because for me, it's just easy to kind of loan it out to somebody to watch it. And, it's an easy way. Oh, borrow this, and I think there's a better chance of them watching it that way instead of me telling, hey, rent it online or watch it on YouTube or something like that. So it's it's a great way of getting people to just watch something and hopefully spark their thinking. Like I said, State of Mind is still this day one of my favorite documentaries, and ShadowRing. Maybe if I watch it from beginning to end, will be my one of my favorite documentaries too. But I broke it up in parts, and definitely looking forward to watching it again because, like you said, it's a whole lot of information and it's a little hard to consume, especially with our very busy and tiring lives. But thank you so much, Mary. Where can people get the film? Where can people get more information and all that stuff?
Well, one more time, it's ShadowRingMovie.com or FreeMindFilms.com, and you can ShadowRing Movie is the most direct way. And I want to thank you for interviewing me, and I want to thank you for all you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I for me personally, and I've said this to a lot of close friends who kind of tell me, you come home from work, you're tired, you have a son, you have all these other things you do, like how, why do you continue doing it? And personally, it's hard for me to take any credit for doing this because it's easier for me to do it than not do it. And I think probably, for Free Mind Films, it's probably the same thing. As much work as it is to put together a film, because I'm sure it's a lot of work to book the guests and get the crew and get the funding and do the editing and promoting and, everything you're doing, doing these interviews and trying to get the word out. It's a whole lot of work, and probably the reward isn't nearly as much as anybody would assume. And at the end of the day, you're driven by what you hope you're doing, and that's creating some change and creating this ripple effect of changing people's consciousness and exposing them to some good information, which hopefully they can expose to some other people and they can expose to some other people, and it becomes this ripple effect of hopefully changing people. And I think people who don't think that they can make a difference, that's exactly what those in power want. They want us to believe we can't make a difference, because that means we're not going to do anything. We're just going to give up, and we're going to live in the system they created and just not ask questions. And I think that people like yourself and myself, I think that we're motivated by wanting to make a difference, even if even if I touch one person and I get one listener to watch this film, or just be exposed to any of the information I talk about on my podcast, to me, that's, I've done my thing, and I'm fulfilled with just that alone. So, and I'm sure you and Chris and James feel exactly the same way.
Yes, thank you very much, and Austin Green as well, our producer, yes, and director, who's worked his butt off. Let me tell you.
Yeah, and I know that I heard an interview with Austin. He was talking about how hopefully Kevin and I believe Austin, or I don't know if you guys have any word. I know he couldn't really say much. Hopefully, try to get on some cable TV shows and stuff like that. How's that all going? Is that some stuff that people should keep an eye out on, and possibly some promoting on?
Yes, we're looking at some television and some cable stuff and some things actually over in Europe. A lot of people over in Europe are very hungry for this kind of information, and so yes, we've got some things kind of in the works. I can't speak to it exactly right now, but some things are in the work, and we are looking at possibly doing a theatrical release version of this down the road.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because I know I had Jesse Ventura on, and I know that he, as popular as he is, they've kind of shunned him from mainstream media and a lot of the big TV shows that he's been on in the past. So anytime you have something like this that's spreading truth and probably going to piss off a lot of the sponsors and of these TV channels and TV shows, it's very hard to get on them. So I'm just glad to hear that you guys are having some success and some luck with doing that. So I wish you guys the best of luck, and I hope that hopefully I see more great films and keep up the great work.
Thanks, Ricky. Much appreciated. Anytime, okay?
Thanks, and keep liking those cute baby pics on Facebook.
I will. I've even told a couple people about them. So.
Thanks, Mary. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.